But here now we're going to start addressing the issue of what the city looks like and the history of this concept of garden cities. Here to put that in kind of historical another kind of historical context is Lucien Steil, who is a professor of architecture here at Notre Dame. And Lucien will lead us here in slow urbanism and urban agriculture. Lucien, please.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I feel less embarrassed now after Will, I don't know how many slides he showed to show my 50 slides and try to squeeze them in 10 minutes. Also, I have slightly changed the title to Slow Urbanism, and I will not talk really about the history. I will talk about something which I think is universal. It's the coexistence of agriculture and urban settlements, villages, cities, and what the Greek called the polis, which is in some way a network of cities, villages, and individual farms, so as a kind of, in a holistic perspective. So it's something new, it's not new, but it's innovative, and it exists, and I think it has been also addressed by Felipe. It exists since the really beginning of urban civilization. Oh, sorry. I have some notes. So traditional urbanism and architecture always have addressed comprehensively and holistically the completeness of life, integrating both the material and spiritual. Their purpose is utility, durability, and beauty, which we call sustainability today. It is an ecological project. It's a global ecological project. In Old German, the language associates building and dwelling. It also associates the art of building cities and the art of farming. They are indissociable activities of human culture. Here, this picture of Amsterdam, you see a very typical European city which kind of incredibly intelligently expresses the genius of city building, land management, and gardening. So you have the gardens integrated, but you also have a symbiotic relationship to a periphery, a rural periphery, which kind of feeds the city and teaches the city, but it's a kind of two-way dialogue and a two-way kind of synergy. When the early settlers came to what's today New York, called New Amsterdam, these people from Amsterdam coming to a new continent, bringing this culture, bringing this intelligence, and creating the most beautiful town in Manhattan, and you see the way the gardens are laid out, and the cities lay out, all kind of dialoguing and kind of completing each other, so the city teaching the gardens and the gardens teaching the city. And all of these gardens, as you imagine, were not purely decorative gardens. They were considered as art, but these gardens celebrate the art of farming and the art of living together in a city. Now, this is Echternach, a monastic city in Luxembourg. I'm showing this. There are many, many cities like that. I'm showing this because I just came across very recently that Father Hiesberg, who is one of the very important figures here at the University of Notre Dame, is actually from this region. His grandfather emigrated to the United States, to New York in 1952. So we go from New York to Echternach. It's a beautiful city where you see the city or the town builds the countryside and the counterparts builds the city, and they kind of have this kind of wonderful symbiosis you find in many of the most beautiful cities, not only European, and you will see, again, this is, again, following up on Father Hiesberg, sorry for this digression, I would say, it's the village, actually, which is close to this town where Father Hiesberg, grandfather, in 1852 came from. That's the village today, 800 inhabitants, and it still has this kind of really perfect harmony where the landscape, the cultural and the agricultural landscape kind of inspire and create this wonderful, really model for human existence. I think the most achieved and the most perfect way we can inhabit ecologically and sustainably this world. Now, this is an aerial view of the same village. You see how this village, this very small village, has inspired and created the most beautiful landscape. And this, all the European landscape is designed by agriculture. It's a culture, it's an result of a historical, cultural process which leads to the good life we admire in good cities, the good food, the good life, the good kind of, and the good and the beautiful urban spaces and conviviality. Now, a very interesting quote by a Japanese scholar: the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfect of human beings. And I think that has been alluded to several times. And I think it's so important to not dismiss and take out the kind of ethics, the moral, and these highly educational perspectives in farming. I'm showing very quickly some images where you see again this beautiful interaction between village and countryside. And the countryside, the village has not been dropped in a beautiful kind of stage set. It's a mutual transformation of a kind of original wilderness into a very beautiful ecological and civilized synthesis. Now, it happens not only in the Western world, it happens also in every continent. You see that how beautifully the farming activities and agriculture kind of shaped and reinvented nature, and how beautifully nature invented places for people to live together and kind of establish this perfect synergy between the urban and the rural, undissociable synergy. And when you look at things like that, and you look at these villages in England, you can't just not imagine another solution. You say, that's the way it has to be. This is really true. This is true. This is universal. Now, coming back to building and dwelling, it's Heidegger who wrote an essay on building and dwelling where he kind of develops it very profoundly and says the way in which we are, you are, and I am, the manner in which we humans are on Earth is Bauen. It's dwelling, building as dwelling, that is as being on Earth. Now, what he also highlights is the Bauen and Wohnen in Old Germanic. It's the kind of similarity of building and dwelling. And also in German, Bauer, the farmer, it's the same words and the builder. Bauer actually is the builder. So the builder of cities and the builder of landscape, they are kind of doing the same thing, and they're working hand in hand, and they are, I would say, the yin and yang of the best urban culture. Now, you see many, many examples where you have this kind of clear dialectics, you have a clear boundary definition of the city as an organism and the countryside, but they kind of interact, and it's not a separation. It's not a degree of great separation. Going from the outside and to the countryside to the interior landscape where people kind of enjoy convivially society, being together, and eating food and drink, which has always been the most beautiful and the most powerful ways of creating peaceful associations, creating peaceful societies, and societies also which are creative and inventive. And yesterday we were having dinner together with some of the lecturers, and I think it was the most inspiring and the most creative meeting, and we didn't fight. You know, we just kind of had this wonderful consensus on the wonderful food we eat, locally produced. Now, some other images of the good public life, where you see in some way this countryside which you have seen outside, it's now inside. And I think that's something which the American city demonstrates quite well. And I will talk more about the ideality, this kind of ideal city Americans try to create, and they succeeded eventually. Projects, these are new projects designed by new urbanists, and I think I'm kind of trying to throw into discussion new urbanism, slow food, and everything comes together, because the kind of global perspective, the perspective is really creating integrated, walkable places where people work and live and enjoy themselves, and they also produce what they produce locally, what they consume and what they do. And then when they do not, what they do not locally, it has to be very, very exceptional. It's where you get into the wonderful benefits of global exchange, but you're not exchanging things you can produce yourself and which kind of suffer from being transported on very far distances. But you can exchange ideas, and you can exchange very refined other things. The private realm, again, you know, these various scales, define these various scales, and you always have this kind of relationship, what today many people refer to as biophilia, this love of nature and this necessity to have it in various conditions in places you live. The idealism of the American city and slow urbanism, I think the American town is really prepared morally, historically, to become slow urban places, and they are prepared to welcome slow food and urban agriculture. They have always been ideal cities encompassing land, nature, home, and community. These have been values which have been kind of encompassed and always celebrated. Now, relation to nature, wilderness, and various degrees of celebration, of integration, I think it's something I'm always struck. I have a class about American city. I'm always struck how celebratory, how kind of almost sacred this relationship is. And it's also, that makes it even more shocking when you see urban sprawl and when you see examples of a fast urban destruction. This is an American city. It's as good as a slow city in Europe. I mean, I don't remember the name of the city, but it's a really, really beautiful Main Street, dense. You know, you have this kind of integration of natural setting. It's a lively, mixed-use city. People live there, they work there, and they can walk there. So, and they are not obliged necessarily to use the car for every movement. Street with cars, so this kind of celebration, the city as a garden, actually, as I mentioned here. So this kind of always reference to the rurality of a kind of, almost in a mythological way, houses under trees, and I think there are places like that in South Bend, and they are unfortunately not off. And then the patriotic gardens, I mean, what other country in the world can have patriotic gardens? I think the idea of patriotism in America is really wonderful, you know, I mean, you don't have to be, I mean, I think it's really fantastic that gardens can become patriotic, and I would just kind of use these arguments whenever I can. Philanthropic, idealist, patriotic, it's an expression of love. I mean, this is a really, love is in the air, you know, this is great, you know, and I think it's coming, and it's, it will be, yesterday we talked over dinner, we talked with our friends from Berlin, and we were saying, the things which are possible are not always the things people like to do. So we have to make in a way that it becomes desirable and that people really, that's what they want. And I think it's just, we're just very close to that. And then if your president does it, I mean, and gives the example, I mean, how we should at least be as patriotic as our president. Now, agrarian urbanism, I'm very quickly go through that. It's not necessary, because agrarian urbanism is a little bit different, because it's really more likely creating new cities which kind of are completely focused on agriculture. And I think it's something really interesting. And I will give you the definition, but I will talk more after I give you examples of what can we do now, small changes, how can we empower ourselves, because we can't rely too much on our politicians. So how can we empower ourselves, little groups, associations, but also individuals, to make a change which is real. Agrarian urbanism is a concept that involves food, not as a means of making a living, and I think that's really important, but that the basis for making a life. So the really kind of symbolical, cultural value of producing food is, and the educational value is really, really highlighted here. And we have to deal, I think we have to deal more or less with two models, and they're still valid. This is a historical model, is the countryside and town, synergy, dialectics, clear articulation, where the countryside helps, support, and the city helps to inform and enlighten the countryside, and you have villages around. This is the idea of the Greek polis, really, where you have a larger area. It's not all urbanized. You have settlements, villages, farms, cities, towns, but they all kind of wisely manage and inhabit the earth which we have to share with many, many other people. This is the antithesis, and it's sprawl, and it's something which you see everywhere, I think, in America, but also Europe, and also in many developing countries. It's a really ecological disaster, and it's kind of with the intention of rediscovering countryside, it destroys the countryside. With the intention of merging countryside and the city, it destroys the very city and urbanity. And the agrarian urbanism of the 15th century, it's still valid. It's really the most innovative and the most sustainable you can imagine. And that's the kind of idea you can recreate, and it's a really inspiring concept. Very quickly here, more about agrarian urbanism definition. what I really like to retain here, it's the kind of rationality of it, this intelligence of kind of reducing the distances and kind of integrating production and consumption and everything on limited territories. And also, you know, the possibilities of actually mitigating climate change and also kind of repairing both suburban sprawl and also environmental damage. Another important thing, the opportunities in urban context, so creating democratic agricultural opportunities. And I think we have been talking about social, about feeding people. You know, it's shocking that in developing countries like America or many people in Europe now, people suffer from hunger, and there's so much wasteland, and they are very, very, as Will has presented, they're really implementable strategies. Some projects which have this kind of perfect integration. These are new projects by the Prince of Wales in England, Poundbury, which shows really a series of strategies where you have modern life with gardens, houses, urban spaces. This is an image of it, the kind of boundary of Poundbury, houses, gardens, walls, beautifully conceived. The block type, an incredibly intelligent block type where you have both parking, gardens, everything integrated, so you can walk through the parking because it's a parking which is a garden. And so the average, it's 2 parkings per unit, which is very, very high, even for developer standard, and you don't see almost no car in the street. It's kind of very, very convenient. A project I have been involved where we took a vast farmland as an inner square. So the square of the city is the farmland, and it becomes a learning place where the schools and the people learn how to do organic farming with the crops which are typically grown in this area. Now, small urbanism, change can happen in little steps. Everyone can be a game changer for a better and more sustainable world. And I'll show you, give you some commandments, if you like. Transform your lawn into a garden. There are 2 examples here. This is South Bend, and this is somewhere where these people, by doing that, they are now sued by the city, unfortunately, but I think laws can be changed. Laws should be intelligent. Another example, lawn to garden, even the lower example, even if the architecture is not very appetizing, the garden kind of helps to make it more acceptable. And the Prince of Wales has, in his royal palace, he has transformed the lawn into a garden, and he kind of actually has much better food now. Transform the parkings. The parking, I'm just appalled by seeing the parkings on the campus here, university, all these huge heat islands and no tree, nothing. It's dangerous, it's not very attractive, and you can do beautiful parkings. And you can have permeable materials, you can plant local trees, and you can change the climate. You can create local climates which is different by doing that. And here is an example how it can be done. So it can be done in any situation if you like to maintain the parking, but you can also plant community gardens because there are too many parkings most of the time. And you have to look at the area review of South Bend. There are probably 50% of parkings are excessive. They are not needed. And this is an example where what you can do with the parking using the soil from a well, and you can do a wonderful job. Now this is what our friends from Berlin do. They create exciting urban jungles where with people who are not dangerous, you know, it's kind of create a completely thrilling experience. You have a garden in the city, and it's not just a garden, you know, with flowers and kind of beautiful perspective. It's really an experience, an immersion into a biophilic orgy. You know, it's really fantastic. Community gardens, you know, it creates this incredibly enlightened, happy faces, and it's so educational. It's so wonderful. And then put gardens on your roof that you don't have to do it in one time. It's apparently expensive, but you can do it bits by bits. And the guys in New York, they know how to do it. You know, they plant their courtyard, and they have this wonderful roof terraces with gardens, and they grow their tomatoes, and they raise the value of their property also, and the quality of their life in the same time. And they can hang out. The roofs become social places because without the gardens, the roofs are just kind of really uninteresting. But with the gardens, they become really public places. And these guys, they put a farm in New York on the rooftop. And I think there are many roofs in South Bend where I can imagine things like that. I mean, it looks so true and convincing, and you just wonder why didn't people do it. Encourage street markets. I know that a lot of laws don't allow it for hygienic reasons. It's completely absurd. And street markets are a really catalyst of social life, and people enjoy it. And it's also when you have roof gardens and you have community gardens, that's the place where you can sell your stuff. Rather than selling it in garage sales or in front of your garden, you just bring it into the public realm and you create new urban activities. Also, cities, you know, rather than investing in parking structures, invest in a beautiful market structure. It's really the symbol in European cities. Many times the market is the symbol of the civic space. It's really the icon. It's the loggia, the public loggia. It's the icon of the public realm. And it creates the farmers market, which we have here in South Bend, and it's really fantastic. You find good food. But I think the farmers market should be in the city rather than being out of the city. It should be a really celebration, an urban celebration. And slow urbanism and slow food, this is what happens. People come together and they have a really, really good time. Thank you so much.
Professor Stahl is a practicing architect, so if there is a lot of imagery to look at here and a lot of possibilities to consider. For those of you in the community who are involved in unity gardens or community gardens or farmers markets, do you have questions about how the city politics, the city government affects this zoning regulations, affect what you do? Are there new possibilities that we should be considering, Professor Stahl, for taking action in some more technical way with the city?
I don't know really about regulations, and I think my assumption is that all the regulations are hostile to the most wisest initiative. So what I normally do with my students, we just go and do projects. And we don't tell politicians about the projects, but we tell the people about the projects. So we try to empower people with ideas, because regulations are done by humans for certain situations, and they can be changed. And they can only be changed. Politicians, as you know, they only change where there's some pressure, some peer pressure, and sometimes the pressure has to be quite substantial because, and you can see this with the gun regulations, but there will be change if the people have a consensus on what to do. And I think at some point there is civil disobedience. I'm not calling for revolution, but sometimes you're just doing things, even if it's not allowed, and it becomes a rule. And the laws will be kind of adapted, you know. And I think these people who plant their lawns, I think at some point it becomes embarrassing, you know, if you get. And I think the city will not do anything about it. So they are fined, but they will not do anything. Now, I would say the School of Architecture, we work with local communities, and if local communities don't ask us, we just go out and find some problems we can address, and we do projects, counter projects. And we do projects where, and I think what I try to show is not putting a solar panel or putting a tree somewhere, but it's a kind of this integration of the various scales which we have to address when we talk about architecture and city, without proposing macro planning each time. Just saying that we can have micro projects, very small things, which can change the thing. We can build a corner, we can build one lot, we can build planned over parking, and it will change reality. It creates a precedent and it creates incentives. So if you kind of do an area, you create a new center of social creativity. And that will generate other centers, and it will kind of gather people. I was in South Bend, there was a gathering for community, like arts community, and I was just surprised to see how many people came together on a very small geographical intersection of Colfax and Hill. People who were all determined to change things, and they had all the intelligence and the ideas to do it, and I think they will do it. So, and I think and some of these micro projects will help doing that. They will just gather momentum and then it kind of starts multiplying. We have to have a big vision. So the vision has not to be small. The vision has to be really, really big. But the projects can be really small and individual. Some people. And then also I really trust, and it's something I've seen so many times in American cities, the power people have to associate with other people. When people believe in something, when you have the faith in something, and when they have ideas and they kind of come together with other people, they really can achieve a lot of things. And I see this also happening here. I think we are in a transition, and it's just, and also it's just a question of time. And I think there are also changes in the political landscape. There, as has been mentioned, I think it's the young generation. There's a change of generation. Because many of our people in Congress and in politics, they are people from the 20th century, and I don't like to make historiographical kind of reference, but I would say they just kind of haven't stepped to this century, which is a century, I think, of ecology and of positive transformation. And I think some people will understand it, and maybe others they maybe have a little bit slow. Slow urbanism is great, but when you think, sometimes you have to think very fast.
Thank you. If there's one quick question, we can take that. But another person who is deeply involved in making those changes happen is Chef Joe Howe. So we can move to Chef after this question.
I was going to say, first of all, we would love to host your group for a small project over at the Unity Gardens. That would be lovely. But I also noticed that there was no discussion. It was great talking points about urban agriculture and urban food and whatnot. And so the bees come to mind. Our city is very supportive of growing gardens in our yards and throughout our city. With 57 Unity Gardens, it's pretty clear that they've been really helpful. But I'm concerned about the bees. We need to get the language restricting honeybees out of our city code, and that would be something I think would be a good discussion. The question is, what do you think about that in your studies?
I didn't understand. Did you say the bees should come out or come in?
Well, obviously they're already here.
Oh, okay.
But the language, in terms of our laws, still prohibit beehives. So they are forced to find their own homes, whereas beehives might make us more safe. So that would be something that I didn't see in your presentation. Have you come across that in your studies?
I will think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That was quick then. Thanks.
No. I think as Felipe, I'm not really. I think the bees should be there because a city without bees, I think it's only half a city. So
there you go.
So I think the bees should be really there. Yeah.
Thanks.
One thing we all love about cities is restaurants, and so to talk about the connections of these gardens to the restaurants in our landscape is Chef Joe Howe, who knows a thing or two about this, actually knows a thing or five about this, and has in the Midwest been one of the pioneers in sourcing ingredients locally. Chef, please.
Good morning, everybody. It's number one, it's an honor to speak at the front with all these professors and growers. But I come from a different direction. What you're producing or what you talk about, I have to present it to you on a table. And first of all, I would, everybody call me Chef Joe, it's always Jean Joe, Chef Joe, but I was fortunate growing up in a wonderful region of Alsace, France, where agriculture was very important. Number one is still the region who have the most biodynamic viticulture in the world. And this was a wonderful experience when I was a little boy. You heard about biodynamic. I have no idea what it was, but you start to talk with a winemaker, and you go out in the field, you see what happened. And it was wonderful to see that. And also, I grew up in a family, a bigger family. My father was a businessman, and he entertained always in home. And what you do, you go in the morning, you go to the market, you pick up the food, and mom was cooking when he was entertaining. Age 12, I started to work in professional kitchen. the same. You go every day on the market, you pick up the food for your 10, 15, 20, 50 customers, what you have to do for the day. Shipped it in, flow in. I was not existing at the time. The railroad station or the trucking system was very common in France, but that's what we used. And then I make different apprenticeship. Well, I want to know the craft after I know the soil where I came from. I started to work in different kitchens. I did my apprenticeship, cooking, pastry, professional baker, butchering, winemaking, hotel school. I thought, why no business school? I have time. Why not? And then when money finished, I was in my 50s. This means how make a difference. But I learned all the craft from the source. And for me, it was very important to develop myself what will be my style in cooking. I learned all the techniques in France, but after that, I spent many years in France. I moved on Italy. Well, I think you have to open your mind on everybody. It's the same as when you talk about Italian food. French people have no idea what Italian food was. It was pizza and overcooked pasta. How longer you cook it, how more you get. And that was important. I spent 10 years over there between all the northern part of Lombardia and Italy and Switzerland. And what you find out, especially when you go in Italy or in Switzerland or in the region of France would you grow up, the people eat what they grow. And I think it's very important. You have to begin from the beginning to know what is the food would you want to eat. I saw my first time a kiwi when I was 25 years old. There's nothing wrong. I don't regret it. I know it now. I don't have passion fruit every day. And that's where you come back. And then I did a lot of different things, but I don't want to give my whole history, but in 1984, I came to the United States. Never spoke a word of English. And I took what makes me a difference between another restaurateur who wants to be successful. First, I took a tour of the United States. I have a Kappa Calyx here. I spent some time in New York. One who liked it all. By the time, was not a lot of greens going on except Grand Park, but there's not lots of growing going on there. And then I spent some time in California. And I see how the agriculture was important. This was one base. The second one, I want to know the whole food history in this country, what is happening in these days to days. When I was a wonderful opening eye to know what you can do. When I opened my restaurant, I decided never to import a fresh product out from the United States. And I can say it still today. I have many different restaurants, why we talk about it. When this restaurant is now open almost 30 years, I never used a fresh American ingredients. When I opened Everest, there was no lots happening in 1984. Most for the restaurant, I still have coffee mugs on the table, and they ask you want a coffee for dinner. It was only 30 years ago. And when you see, and that's I think what is wonderful, we talk about the future, but the advancement was happening in the last 30 years. It's unbelievable in this country. I think we talk about we have to make much, much more, but the food education was pretty poor 30 years ago. And I'm surprised where we are to our, both there's lots of media, lots of writing, lots of books out, and the people learned about. But I think what was wonderful, the people said to test, and I think between the gardens and everything is much different. And that's about the Everest, but we come back with philosophy on my food. After that, I opened a corner bakery. And everybody thought, you will fail. I thought, why? The flour in the United States is not good, the craft is not good, the water is not... And then there was 10,000 excuses. I thought, fine, when I fail, I fail. When you chant. But I did my study with flour. I used some organic flour companies I use. And I opened the first corner bakery. In the first week, per day, we use a half a ton of flour when I only use American flour. And the same way, when we think today, 70% of the flour what the bakery are using in France are come from the United States. Many kind of psychological, but again, I think the sources are here. You have to look for. They're not always easy to find, but they're here. And I did a corner bakery. I did some other. I opened Thai restaurant, I opened a casual restaurant, everything. But to go back, I think I was always what coming back to be a basketball chef. The business part is one thing, but a chef. You have to taste the best way, the food, the way we buy it. When that comes in regular, for me, it's important point is what you buy is what you will eat. But it's my responsibility or my job or what I like to do is to give it the best way, but also the healthiest way. And I think that's where I think in my profession you have chefs and chefs, you have growers and growers, you have good food, very good food, bad food and very bad food. And I think that's where we're here. When I think sustainable food is better for you. Not long ago, you used herbs and spices to enhance, on sugar to enhance your food. Now, I think in recent decade, her tastes are gone. We get confused. They use so much pesticides. They use so much sugar. They use so much starch. And this is where your taste slowly gone. And I think it's time to give almost a re-education what you're supposed to be eating. You have to balance your food. You have to choose your food. You have to know the right way to cook it. But I think you have also to know first you have to know how to balance your lunch or dinner, your food when you're preparing for yourself before you go. You have to know to balance. On this has been different what you're using and also the portion control. I'm still shocked today. The portion control in this country is outrageous. Why do you need an 18-ounce steak? We have people from Europe here, 18-ounce steak is a family of 4. They don't starve over there. They're in a good shape. But it's also, I think that's where I'm thinking in the restaurant business, I balance the food, want to give you the portion what you need. You want to leave the restaurant, I'm talking now about fine dining, you want to leave, you don't want to be stuffed, you have enough, but you feel good. You don't want to come home with the only thing I can do, I have to sit on the TV or not watch TV. No. You have a wonderful evening. You have me the best companion. You go home, you want to have fun. I don't know what you want to do, but you have a good time. And most of the time, you can have 6 fast burgers. I don't think you go home and have a fun time. Why food is sensuality. It's sexuality. It's enchances. It's communication. It's so much happening inside you to express yourself. And I think that's really, is really important to want to buy. Concerning buying food, I believe eat fresh and seasonal. And also we don't have the winter, we have snow, but you can balance your food. The one thing with today, what you can find wonderful food, but no buy canned food. The canning food is bad for you. You have now some technique to make some good frozen food, I think is available. But everything was canned. Read the label twice or 3 or 4 times as you have it. Put on the front from your eyes, compare what it is. When you see what is inside, sugar, corn, more sugar, more corn sugar. It's all over. And I think today, that's what I see. We eat so much synthetic food. I call it synthetic, right? It's not good for you. And I think it's the only way we go. Eat what you know. Also, I think everybody's conscious, I thought financial-wise. Eat the food for the season. It's the best food for you. It's the less expensive one. You want to buy asparagus on March. They come from somewhere. I don't know where many times. Many times it's a Chinese word. I don't read Chinese. Comes from somewhere. It's not taste good. You don't know where it comes from, how it's made. And it's very expensive. Eat locally so much as you can. To go back, when I came here, all the food producers, everything we're using food-wise in my restaurant, I know all the grower, what I'm using. If it's meat, if it's fish, if it's produce. I get so much in love. Around 16 years ago, I bought a house around here, just as I can be in farmland, but I'm a country boy. City is one way to live, but you have to see the green on the earth. We talk about architecture. You have to see the green. I think urbanism is fine, but I like to know is there lots of earth below me, or not only tubes with water going under me. I need, the big holes were forming. And I think it's just I think to go back in the future, I think you have a lot of possibility. When I saw how much is happening, and it's up all her growers on every to more educate the younger generation. The older generation, I know if you can change, but I think the younger generation, we are very fortunate. They want good food. They want food would taste really well. And trust me, when you're healthy, it's the less expensive way what you can go in life. You go to the doctor, it's too much money anyway. Spending in a good restaurant is much, much worth it. But thank you very much. Nice to be here. Any question? Yeah. I want also maybe to add today, I think one good thing we have now in cooking, we have so much better technology to cook it. We're much more ahead as we were many years ago. And I think when we talk about cooking technique, every ingredients what you eat have a certain temperature, what you have to eat, a certain wellness. I think I mentioned this, when you either washing, when you come in the washing process, you don't wash just a big blade just the same way as you wash a potato. When everything counts for the beginning, every technique what you're using for the A to Z have a way to do it. Like you want to have a wonderful lettuce, what you keep it too long in the water, the flavors are gone. I think you have certain, like when you have a potato, the best way is you peel it and you don't wash it. The flavor will be totally different. I'm sorry. Go on.
How do you finesse the issue of seasonality when you live in a northerly area like we do here and in Chicago? I love root vegetables, but commercially I would think that feeding people nothing but root vegetables for 4 months would be a little bit risky.
Okay. For all these years, I like to marry the poor on the rich, on the wealthier. That's according cooking-wise. When you have one full root vegetable, rutabaga, you manage this with a much higher end. This means you can make a rutabaga, nobody wants to use, you have maybe 10, you have maybe 50 ways to prepare rutabaga, but prepare with a noble vegetable, with a noble protein, what you have. Rutabaga on a wild game is perfect. You have a duck with a rutabaga is fabulous. You have celery on lobster goes really well. I think you have something, when you make your blend on your marriage, you have to know which direction to go. I think it's one, you can, and I think I was always using an egg. How you serve an egg? It's boring to use an egg, but you serve an egg with caviar, it's communal. And I think that's where I think, you have chestnut is always boring, chestnut, but now certainly you find somebody who will farm goose, you serve some wonderful goose with. It's a fabulous taste going together. And I think that's where, I think root vegetable, I think is coming back much, much more. But I think what we see, while you talk about produce specifically, I think in 10 years from today, you will have around so many more vegetarian restaurants in this country. It's a big change. I think it was, before a vegetable was always a side, what they call it. In Europe, you sit over there, we make 7 corners. You call it tuna, you put one here, one here, one here. And to tell you, the vegetable in the restaurant business in France was always designed. Was always a little side dish. And I think today, they realize it. And today, still when I go in a restaurant or go in the kitchen or talk with a professional, I will say in his walk-in cool refrigerator or on the menu how much vegetable he uses. I will tell you what kind of chef it is. Mm-hmm. Why I think still lots of people ignore it. And I'm sure you heard the problem in France right now, what they buy too much finished product already cooked. That's a whole different subject, but I think it's a lot to do. But to come back, when I started here in 1984, I forgot to say, I used only Homestead cheesemaker. Trust me, in 84 was 3. One in Wisconsin, one year was Maytag Blue, and then I was Chanel who did this. I was 3 the whole country. Now, today is a whole different, but 84 was a very difficult beginning. But I think stick with the good food, and that's what I did. I only use American ingredients, and you have it here. You have to look for on today what you have. you have almost everything in this country. When you can get it, you don't have to serve it. You don't have to eat it.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you were talking about in terms of pairing seasonal foods with each other. You know, we hear a lot about wine pairing, beer pairing, things like that. I think it would be helpful if more people were teaching in terms of cooking how to do just what you're talking about.
But you will have a stage. I make a good demo here. I don't have a stage to cooking here. But I think, again, test food. No go with creation, no go with creativity. Test your food and retest it. Or make comparison. When you go in a store, when you see this is, they told you they make a substantial, wonderful, it can be anywhere with it. Make a test. Cook it the same way both. You will see they will taste differently. They all taste differently. You buy from two produce, you buy a potato, you bake it. The same way both, you take it out the same size, they will taste different. But again, we took different soil, and that makes a difference.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Charlotte Wolf, Prairie Winds Farm. And I just want to point out, his question relates to what you're talking about in your history with Paris. They, in the early 1900s, I read an article that showed all of the glass, the vegetables were all grown under glass, and it was sort of at the outskirts of the city. And this was before any solar panels or plastic greenhouse materials. And they used mats made out of reeds that they would have people go out there and they would roll up the reeds every morning, and then every night they would roll down the reed mats that would cover these glass hothouse, and they would use manure, horse manure. So there's all these, techniques from the past, but that would basically supply all of the vegetables for Paris year-round.
Yeah,
Even
but
in
I
the
have,
wintertime.
I have to add something on this, and I hope I don't make it too big controversy. I think growing in the city is perfect, can be great, but remember how much pollution you have in the city. Well, that's a whole different conversation. I don't want to go in, but I think it's still a lot to do pollution-wise. We have to have better food. This country is really wasted and polluted. What I think, I have restaurants in Vegas. Finished 15 years ago, I go to the governor and talk, why is a city like Vegas no recycling? 15 years ago, they no recycle one item in Las Vegas. You have 45 million people visiting a year. There's not one recycle program 15 years ago. Finally, they have it, but it's not acceptable. And I think it's all reflecting the food we have today. Anyway, to prove it the best way, come in one of my restaurants and I can tell you what I do. Thank you.
I was going to ask a question. My name is Jay Little, and I'm here with Alpha, the Elkhart Local Food Alliance. One thing that I think is really interesting that you point out, 4 years ago when I started a garden in Elkhart, I grew pumpkins, and other than your standard typical ones that you buy at the store, and I found out that you can really eat pumpkins and that they store, especially winter pumpkins, store really well, like Jardale, Queensland Blue, and Australian butter. And you're really right, when you eat stuff that's been prepared, like where you've got like spices and stuff like that, and most people, we don't know that here in America anymore, and it's kind of really sad when you think about how we cook food here in America, because there's a lot of people that don't know it.
But it's where to practice at home. You make mistakes when you make it, it's okay. You know it's for you anyway, but do it, and that's where you learn. Just how more you cook in your house, how more you entertain your house. Number one is, it's nothing nice for us to cook in your house and have the wonderful conviviality at the evening. You have the wine and the food. I think restaurant for me is still a luxury item, a luxury product, but I think it's wonderful to make it in your home, taste it, and when you're really good about it, you have better friends coming. And then you have more, but that's how you learn. That's how you learn. We all make mistakes, so long as we know we make the mistake, so we fix the mistake. I think that's the way to go. But I think I'm really lucky. I have a wonderful profession. I can make lots of people happy. I think either when read, write, so long as you have taste, and you can have a conversation around your table, I think most of the people have a wonderful time. That's what I'm really satisfied. I make lots of people happy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think we can now turn from Chicago to South Bend. The mayor of South Bend is here, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. We are delighted to have him here with us. There's a little backstory here. As Professor Crafton noted at the beginning of the conference, we put together a grant proposal for the European Union delegation to the United States, and Mayor Buttigieg was very supportive, excited about the project that we had proposed, and has been supportive ever since. So please welcome the mayor, Pete Buttigieg.
Terrific. Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here at this event. It is always gratifying to go from a meeting such as what we had, what must have been almost a year ago, where a good idea is mentioned, and then see it emerge and see it hit the ground as a reality. And I regret I wasn't able to be here for the morning proceedings, but I'm looking forward to having a conversation with the group, soaking up on behalf of the city some of the insights that I'm sure have already emerged from this morning's discussion. And to that end, I'll be as brief as possible so that we can get into more of a Q&A and a discussion mode. The administration is preoccupied with three basic projects. And I'll come in a moment to what all of this might have to do with sustainability and what all this might have to do with the direction that people's relationship to their food is taking. The first is to ensure that the basics of life are so easy that citizens don't have to think about them. The thought is that it is difficult enough for a citizen to do whatever it is they're doing, raising a family, holding down a job, getting through school, without having to wonder whether or not they're going to be able to get there on an adequate road, or whether the faucet downstairs will deliver for them a glass of clean, safe drinking water that won't poison anybody in the household. Basics. And to the extent that a city administration can take the basics off the table, it empowers citizens to invest their energies in what really matters. The second activity is to provide good government. In other words, to make sure that the activity and the structure and the operations of government are always becoming more cost-effective, more efficient, and more transparent. And the third thing we focus on, what I think anybody in my position or any other, from president to dog catcher, needs to be able to explain, is the creation of jobs and the support of economic development. And as I reflect on how sustainability and a green mentality has implications for each of these, I think it becomes clear that there really is a great deal to do with these three central projects of our administration. When it comes to the basics, we try to make sure that we deliver the basics in an increasingly well thought out way. The whole concept of sustainability has to do with a recognition that what we're doing needs to be established with a longer time horizon than we were accustomed to thinking. And it is difficult for corporations to think on a long time horizon sometimes because of the time value of money. It is even more difficult for elected officials to think with long time horizons because of the nature of the political cycle and the very short amount of time between when we make a decision and when we have to explain it to citizens. But we're trying to think longer term, and South Bend is one of many communities that's living with the consequences of some shorter term thinking in the structure of our sewer system. And I'll resist the urge to share with you the details of our wastewater management system. But one thing we're very proud of as a community is the fact that we've deployed new technology in order to avoid over $100 million in upgrades simply by better using what we already have. And it's an example of something that we really hope that most citizens will never know we were doing. And yet we've been able to go from 26 or 27 outfall events where untreated sewage winds up going into the river to 0 on average a year, simply by using technology better. We're also trying to be smarter about the delivery of energy. Now, we're not one of those cities that runs the utility. We don't provide electricity. But we use an awful lot of it. And so we're trying to figure out how to use just a little bit less. We've deployed new lighting in buildings throughout the city, city-owned buildings, such as the Parks Maintenance Center and some of our recreational facilities. And we're also taking advantage of a regulatory loophole that allows us to own and operate a turbine generator in the river, which we can then use, effectively sell the electricity to ourselves and pull that much less electricity off the grid where we know it's coming in from, unfortunately, some of the most polluting sources available, because we're in an area that relies on coal. There's a funny footnote on that move, trying to be smarter about hydroelectricity, which is that all we're doing is resuming something that we were already doing 100 years ago. Right? The reason that there was an industrial base built around downtown South Bend is that there was a time when we used the river as a primary source of power. And so, in a funny way, we're not doing anything radically novel so much as recapturing something that we once knew how to do. And it's interesting how many times that theme emerges. If you go to our Studebaker Museum, which celebrates the heritage of the Studebaker Car Company, one of the things you'll see there is one of the first cars, true cars, horseless carriages they produced, 1904, and the thing was electric. And they were making electric cars long before it was cool. And if you think about that, and you think about how much money and effort and energy, technologically and financially, but also culturally, that it's taking for us now to return to the idea that an electric car probably makes sense, you realize that we had to unlearn that electricity was the right way to run a car, only to relearn it over time in the face of new considerations. Just about an hour ago, I was on a school bus, a propane school bus, which is a very interesting development that is going to enable the South Bend School Corporation, we believe, to not only operate a much greener fleet with the help of the South Bend Municipal Energy Office, doing some of the research for them, but also be able to save money. And this brings me to one of the cautionary notes I did want to sound and try to sound any time I'm in an environment where the broader theme of sustainability is being discussed. A cautionary note is this. So many of the things that we do when it comes to enhancing sustainability are things that we should be doing anyway, strictly on economic grounds. So the propane bus is a good example. It costs about $10,000 more to buy it in the first place, but it saves about $4,000 a year and it lasts 20 years. So you very quickly do the math and you realize it's something you would be doing even if you had no awareness of carbon emissions. And it is commonplace, even fashionable, to say not only is this the right thing to do for the environment, but it's also the sensible thing to do economically. And we're correct to point that out, and whenever that's the case, we ought to do something about it and move that much quicker. I worry, though, that that is an escape from the true duty of politics and public service. And that is to make decisions in cases where it's not a win-win. If all these decisions that we're making about our relationship to the systems of which we are a part, and especially the natural systems that we depend on for our life, if all of them were decisions between a win and another win, if all of them were no-brainers, we wouldn't need decision makers to make them. And those decision makers wouldn't need that much courage in order to do them. So I would challenge those of us who are participating in a conversation about sustainability, not only to make sure that when there are the no-brainers, that when there are the win-wins, that we're doing them, because by definition we ought to be, but also to think about very real trade-offs that we are contemplating making that are the right trade-offs, situations where there are winners and losers, opportunities to do things in a different way that does benefit us and that we think is the right thing to do, but that may have a cost. It may simply cost more to do something in a green way. If it costs less, great, but again, that's a no-brainer. When it costs more, when should we do it anyway? That's the conversation that's going to require a little bit of imagination, a little bit of courage, a little bit of political will, because that means that in order to do something in a more responsible way, we have to give something else up. And we have to, in my view, embrace that fact and be open to it. The last thing I wanted to mention is that I think we live in a very interesting time at the intersection of cities and city policy and the way we think about living in cities. and this broader conversation that we're having about how to live smarter and live more responsibly. And that is that we're living in a moment when people have rediscovered the city, even a small city like ours. There's a sense that it's desirable to be in a city, which even half a generation ago was not quite so dominant. So we have an opportunity to reap some of the benefits of a new awareness of the benefits or the virtue of living in a city. The benefits of density. The fact that when you are within walking distance of the places that you shop and work close to where you live, that brings social benefits, the increased likelihood of chance encounters with other people, brings environmental benefits, brings health benefits. Something I did a couple hours before I was on the actual school bus was I participated in something called a walking school bus. And the idea here is to encourage students to walk to school and encourage parents to have their students walk to school by organizing a group of parents, in this case police officers too, to make sure that we were secure from a traffic perspective. And then we had a walking school bus, about 50 kids walking from an area where they could gather all the way up to their school. Not only is this something that was nice to do on a spring day, but it points to a fairly alarming set of statistics that the level of vehicle miles traveled corresponds to just about every bad social indicator you can think of. Just take one example, cancer. You can do a straight line correlation, and I'm sorry I didn't bring one along. I've been looking to dig up the numbers on this. You do a straight line correlation where if you map among American cities, the average number per capita of vehicles miles traveled, and you map the number of cancer deaths, you see a straight line going up and to the right. They're very powerful patterns that link together our ways of life and our quality of life. And living at a moment when people are rediscovering the virtue of walking to a place, the virtue of that kind of closeness and connectedness, the virtue of densification, gives us a real opportunity, I think, to enhance the quality of our lives, not to mention the length of our lives, which is about as basic as it gets. There's something happening in terms of the energy around living in a smarter way, and particularly living in a smarter way when it comes to our relationship with our food. I see a few faces here that I recognize from an event called Ignite Michiana, which happened about a month ago. It was a round of TED-style talks done in quick succession at the State Theater, a structure which is ripe for adaptive reuse in the middle of downtown South Bend, and is finally getting the love and attention that it needs as a structure. And fully half of those presentations or more had something to do with having a better, more responsible, more rewarding relationship with our own food. So it's the right moment to be having this conversation, and I'm very eager to hear from you about what some of the policy responses that make sense at a local level might be, so that we can take advantage of that momentum, put a sail up in that wind that seems to be blowing our way, and do something with it that will make South Bend a very positive example for communities around us looking to do the same thing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maya Parson from Edible Michiana Magazine, and I live in one of the historic neighborhoods in South Bend on the south side, and I had an unexpected phone call, I think last week or the week before. I live next door to a religious community center, and they have a lot of events there, and there are regularly heaps of garbage that are put out at the curb for the waste trucks to pick up. And I always look on this with a little bit of dismay, thinking about all this garbage that's headed to the landfill. And one day, the manager called me unexpectedly, and he said, I was in my office, which looks right into my backyard, and I saw your compost bin. And I wondered if you could tell me about it. You know, where can I get one? How do you use it? And I was really happy to get this phone call. So, of course, I gave him probably way too much information, much more than he wanted to know. But one of my fantasies for the city of South Bend is to see the city actively encouraging our local communities to compost. I feel like it's a really basic thing that people can do in their own backyards. They don't even have to be gardening. They're just creating soil out of what would otherwise be waste. And And I'd also like to know if, like when I dream big, if there's any way we could be at least putting on the horizon or on the table the idea of city pickup for food waste. I know that there are cities that are doing this, and we have yard waste pickup, so why not dream big and think about food waste pickup as well, and using that to create compost for Unity Gardens or other projects in our city. Thank you.
Well, thanks for raising that. There's no question that we can grow more in terms of the way that we handle our waste streams. First, before we get to that, we have to do commercial recycling, which we don't even have in this community, as you probably know. And so we have work to do. I think the conceptual shift that still needs to happen, that if people thought this way, it would make it easier to move in that direction on composting and other things, is that it's very easy to think of delivering something as a utility, right? We deliver water, that's a utility. We deliver electricity, that's a utility. It's less common to think of getting rid of things as a utility, but it is. And it's costly to do so, right? And so when we think of anything from wastewater to physical waste, moving those things out is just as much, sometimes more, of a collective and public effort than delivering them in the first place in their raw form. And we're trying to make sure that there's more awareness of that there is a cost to entering something into a waste stream, whichever stream it is. And then we can start thinking about how much smarter it would be to have more than one of them. So the point's very much well taken. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can hear you, that's all right.
That may have a long-term benefit to the city. The point that you just made in terms of food waste collection, into composting versus just going into a landfill, maybe the cost of the piece at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to continue and you really measure the environmental impact to your city, could be a bigger benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is happening in cities. It's happening in a pilot project in Milwaukee. So maybe a pilot project to see if that's something that's feasible, something that can benefit in looking at the food production and the good foods that can come out of having really good soil.
Mm-hmm.
In these cities that we have to grow good soil,
Mm-hmm.
to grow food. So if you look at it in more of a holistic way,
Yep.
I think that's where politicos can come in and make that happen. Mayors, city councils can make those policies, create those policies that can help people that want to do this work. Because without, in the case of growing food, if you're not able to grow soil in these cities, you're never going to be able to grow the food.
Yeah, and I think people need to see it to believe it, which is why there's a lot of value in a pilot and in knowing that it's been done elsewhere. Certainly I've been in cities in the U.S. where there's three streams, right? There's waste, there's recycling, and then there's food, and a lot to be said for that. Yes.
My name is Katie, and I work with the Seed to Feed program in Elkhart, which is a program that's trying to better the sustainability efforts of providing fresh food to low-income people. And so we're working with area farmers and developing education programs and also gardens to try and provide more fresh, local, healthy food to area food pantries. And so as I think about the work we do with the gardens in that program and hearing today about some of the other urban agriculture efforts, I wanted to hear from you, coming from a perspective of a leadership position within a city that is already doing some innovative gardening projects and other projects. What sort of challenges do you face when we come up with these ideas and are trying to push forward on these projects? What are the challenges that the city faces, and what are also some of the ways that we with our projects can better work together with city officials to develop them?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I think these initiatives and efforts like yours and the others that have happened in the city that we're very proud of, they have to be organic, pun intended. They are very rarely going to be driven in the first instance by government. Our role, I think, in government is to foster, encourage, and support these kinds of initiatives. And in particular, to try to tear down the obstacles. So I can either speak from an administration perspective or from a community perspective when you talk about the challenges, right? From a community perspective, there is a simple public health challenge to which you're already addressing yourself, which is the availability. Public health and economic challenge, right? Which is the availability of fresh and healthy food to low-income residents. And we're a community that has a lot of low-income residents. We're 24% below the federal poverty line. And more than half of our kids in the public school system are qualify for free or reduced lunch. So you're already addressing yourself to that concern. And one of the things that's great about a city our size, just over 100,000, is that we're big enough to matter, but small enough to get your arms around. And where if you launch something, the problems that you discover will be like the problems you'll discover at a larger scale. It's complex enough that that's going to happen. It also means if you solve them, it'll be real and meaningful, and you can do something. We've tried, Unity Gardens comes to mind, right, where we have a great opportunity to partner with something. We didn't start it, we didn't make it up. We learned how great it was and have seen it grow as one of the fastest growing, probably the fastest growing nonprofit in our community. How many gardens are we at now? 57. And this is not a group that's been around for long. 4 years. Very few organizations grow at that pace. So that tells you that there's demand, there's an interest, there's something going on. And then our job becomes to get out of the way and lend a hand where we can. The days of a city having pots of money to toss at good projects and initiatives may be over, but we may be able to, it's as simple from we took old campaign stakes that we used for campaign signs when I was running, and I think tomatoes are now winding their way around those stakes, to making land available. Last night I was talking to somebody who's cultivating a really impressive array of food in his backyard, and I said, what's the difference between your yard and somebody else's yard? Is there wide variation in soil conditions or hydrology? What's going on that would make you more successful than somebody else? And he said the biggest difference is just how many trees there are. He said you'd be hard-pressed to find a plot of land in the city with not a lot of trees. And I got to thinking, well, that might be true, but I've committed that this city is going to address 1,000 vacant and abandoned houses in 1,000 days. Now, address doesn't necessarily mean demolish, but address sometimes means demolish. And if the city's going to be demolishing vacant and abandoned homes, and we know that the market's not ready to put a new house on that spot right away, otherwise it wouldn't have been vacant and abandoned in the first place, we may have a choice piece of property for urban agriculture. Could be a great opportunity. Now, the hard part is that, oddly enough, the city can tear down a house without ever winding up owning the property. So it's not ours to give away. On the other hand, there's a very nice state law that's recently passed that says that nobody can sue you for looking after somebody else's property if they're not taking care of it, which to my mind is a nice little loophole that urban agriculture could go sailing through. Now, I'm not giving legal advice, but there are a whole bunch of opportunities, I think, to join up to deal with mutual solutions to mutual problems that are community problems, but also administration challenges. Yes?
Hi. Mayor Pete, my name's Jan Pilarski, and I'm with a new venture called Greenbridge Growers. I'm part of Mr. Will Allen's commercial urban agriculture program, and we also are just coming off winning the Greatest Social Impact Award at the McCloskey Business Competition.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I guess I'm just speaking up to say I'm very interested in partnering with the city because our venture, our tagline is growing good food and good jobs. So to use extended season methods, much like Mr. Allen uses in Milwaukee, also using aquaponics with the idea of putting to work people on the autism spectrum who are 90% unemployed. So as we're looking at some of that land, and today's New York Times also page D, the food section, revitalizing the Rust Belt, all about urban agriculture, in the Great Lakes area.
We'll have to dash home and read that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I think there's a lot of interest in the room in all of that, and a lot of pieces in place, Unity Gardens, Yardners, all of that you described at
Terrific.
Ignite.
And again, my message is, it's so great that that's going on, because the best message I can give is that you do it and let us know how to help. And when it means getting out of the way, it's that. We know that we can get in the way sometimes. We don't mean to. It just happens. And when we can give a push in the right direction, let us know that too. And then we'll do whatever we can to be supportive.
I just wanted to make one more point. And the key thing you said for me is the same thing that the same thing that Mayor Barrett many years ago when he was a congressman, and then he became the mayor of Milwaukee. He said the best thing I ever did was to stay out of your way. Mm-hmm. And I think that for this community is really an important statement to hear from the mayor, that he's not putting up roadblocks, because in a lot of cities they come up with all kinds of policies that you can't do this. But the other point that you brought up on this 1,000 homes, and some of them will be rehabbed, I'm sure, and some will be taken down. But when we take down a house and the city owns the land, I think it's important that somehow we're able to put that land in long-term trust, for the simple reason that it takes a long time to rehab the soil. You can't dig down because of the contaminants, and people have to be able to grow new soil, and that's an expensive proposition, because every 15 feet you need a yard of soil to be able to grow a garden. So imagine if you have a 100 by 100 foot square piece of land, how much new soil you have to be able to grow that food. Yep. So just not guerrilla gardening kind of a thing where you go in and you have that land for 1 year is really not. Right. I would never recommend anybody starting a garden for 1 year because of the expense and the fact that you can't really dig down. You can't plow it up and start growing food.
Right. It's a great point. It's one reason we would like to be given the authority to create what's called land banks, so that the city can, in fact, take title or have the title go to a nonprofit. For that, we need the state to get out of the way, so I'm working on that when I go down to Indianapolis, but it's a priority. I'll tell you one other story just in terms of the city getting in the way. I met an expert recently in landscape architecture is her main field. One of the leaders, national leaders in her field. And she lives in Philadelphia. And she created this incredible native grasses planting in her front yard. It was not only very interesting to look at, but it had the added benefit that just by the way it was set up, it diverted a great deal of rainwater from ever winding up in the wastewater system because it absorbed it slowly, which is one of the benefits of native grasses. For this, she was rewarded with a summons from code enforcement asking why she didn't mow her lawn, right? Now, nobody meant to get in the way of a good effort like that, but it's an example of how well-intentioned policy can go off the rails if it's not flexible to accommodate the right kinds of things happening. Professor?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the key question. Because I was asked, when I was presenting, I was asked what suspendees why suspendees isn't allowing the bees to come.
The bees. You would not believe how many different kinds of animals have been coming into our policy conversations, from dogs and cats to the animals at the zoo to the bees. The honest answer is I don't know. I know that there are some policy limitations we're working within. We're trying to get a better sense of how to do it the right way. We simply haven't caught up in our grasp of some of the policy limitations we're working within to get a final answer there. But we're... We did. Yeah. Yeah. We like, and again, this is where you get into all the fun of a council process. And I know you've spent some time in our council chamber, and you know that there are a lot of different perspectives that come in there that need to be taken into account when we're trying to have a more flexible policy. But look, I think the bee project is very exciting. Over in Chicago, they cultivated them on the roof of City Hall itself, and they sell these little, my mother calls them Mayor Daley's honey. I don't know if it was a mayoral initiative in particular, but it's a nice thing to be associated with. So it's something we'd like to see grow. We just need to make sure we're doing it in the right way. Yes?
Hi, I'm Sarah Mckibben. I teach Irish language and literature here, and I'm an enthusiastic home gardener. My husband just built 9 new raised beds. We're right across the street from Memorial Hospital, right under the helipad, so air quality not so good, and we have a diesel generator that's sort of spewing at us for maybe 6 hours of the weekend last weekend, but we're doing what we can, and my 4-year-old is super excited. I just wanted to say something that Janice mentioned to me, which is that in some cities, composting is run as a business because, of course, the more people garden, the more people need to buy great dirt. So I don't think it should only be thought about as a utility, but actually as either a city-run revenue stream or a privately run company for profit, because we have the material for it, and it could be really fabulous. When we did our raised beds, we also just put the dirt on top, got it delivered into our garden, and a small child with his wheelbarrow did very little, and the adults did quite a lot, and and we're ready to get more, and we advise people that that's a great way to start.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, and we're actually in the process right now of reimagining the way that we handle our city organic resources flow too. One of the best kept secrets has been we make available some of the byproducts of our own wastewater processes through the organic resources department. We see a lot of opportunity there. It's amazing what you can reuse. And I know I'm between you and lunch, so maybe I'll close on this note. We're talking about now recycling heat itself, energy itself. Recycled energy is going to be the key toward our goal of making one of the major empty Studebaker buildings come back online, taking data intensive computing facilities that will fill one part of the building, drawing the waste heat off of them and then piping it into the heating and cooling system of the rest of the building to make it viable to have offices and lofts. So just about everything we used to think of as waste is proving to have some kind of usefulness and utility. And to my mind, that matches so elegantly with a basic distinguishing feature of the character of South Bend. And that is that we have always been a community that recycles, that takes things and turns them into something else. We had the old industrial waterway downtown, and we took it and turned it into North America's first artificial kayak run. We literally recycled a river. We have a high school downtown that was empty, closed its doors in 1968, came back to life as apartments. There's one guy in there who has a place that used to be the swimming pool. He puts bands, he's a concert music lover, so he'll put a band in the deep end, have all his friends in the shallow end on sofas, and have a concert in there. Some of you may know about a very interesting small business here that takes pianos that are destined to the landfill and intercepts them. If there is an estate sale, a church, whatever, any reason that a piano might be in danger of being thrown away, Steve and Emily Merriman will lay hands on that piano. And they've already filled up their own place, so they're always begging some friend to make a garage or something available. They run a halfway house for pianos. And then they recycle them. He tinkers and he fixes these things. It's not about selling the piano. It's about making sure that they're fixed up and getting them into people's homes. He believes that every civilized house ought to have a bookcase, and it ought to have a toilet, and it ought to have a piano. So we're recycling pianos. We're trying to recycle that building. We're reusing what we've got, the vacant and abandoned houses. It just happens to be something that South Bend does very well. Taking what we have and fashioning it into something else, seeing the value in something that had been discarded or outmoded, and seeing new value in that. And so, once again, I can't think of a better alignment between the character and spirit and tradition of our city and the kinds of themes, novel though they may sound, the kinds of long-running themes that are being discussed and celebrated at this conference. So very excited to have been part of it, and excited to learn about some of the other ideas that I know will emerge from the proceedings today. Thank you.